Lesson 2, Rizal's Early Childhood. Module 3, Rizal's Family, Childhood, and Early Education. The objectives of this lesson: analyze Rizal's family, childhood, and early education. Evaluate the people and events and their influence on Rizal's early life. Guide question: how did the events of Jose's early childhood shaped his character? The birth of Rizal. Jose P. Rizal, the seventh child of the Rizal family, was born on June 19, 1861, Wednesday, between 11 and 12 midnight in the town of Calamba, province of Laguna, Philippines. His mother almost died during her delivery because Jose's head was big, as he recounted in his student memoir. My coming out in this veil of tears would have cost my mother her life, had she not vowed to the Virgin of Antipolo to take me to her sanctuary by way of pilgrimage. He was baptized in the Catholic Church in Calamba on June 22, 1861 by the parish priest, Father Rufino Colliantes. His godfather was Father Pedro Casañas, a close friend of the Rizal family. Father Colliantes was impressed by the big head of baby Jose. He said to them, "Take good care of this child, for some day he will become a great man." The name Jose was chosen by his mother in honor of San Jose, Saint Joseph, whose feast was March 19. His complete name was Jose Protasio Mercado Rizal Alonzo y Realonda. The name Protasio was taken from the Catholic calendar, which was a practice during the Spanish time, that when a child is born, he or she is named after the saint of the day. The surname Mercado, which means market in English, was adopted in 1731 by his paternal great-grandfather, Domingo Lamco, a full-blooded Chinese merchant. Added surname Rizal was given by Don Francisco, which is closer to the Spanish word racial, which means luntiang bukirin, related to his work as hacienda owner or farmer. Alonzo was the surname of Rizal's mother, and Realonda was used by Doña Teodora, which is the surname of her godmother. Jose Rizal's childhood years. Jose Rizal, as a young boy, had beautiful, fruitful, and pleasant memories as well as sorrow. He grew up in a happy home. He could remember the tenderest care of his parents because he was frail, sickly, and undersized boy. His father built a nipa hut in the garden for him to play in the daytime. At the age of 3, he enjoyed watching in the garden the insects, the maya, kulyawan, Maria capra, pipit, the martin, and other birds. He listened with excitement and wonder to their twilight songs and sounds. Another childhood memory was the daily praying of Angelus at 6 p.m. in their altar as all of them gathered for prayers. At the azotea on a moonlight night, the Aya, nursemaid, would tell stories about the fairies, legends, tales of buried treasures, and other fabulous stories. Sometimes, if he did not like to eat his supper, the Aya would threaten him that Aswang, Tikbalang, Nuno, or the Turbane Bombay will come to take him away. He is brought for a walk for the relief-giving breeze, to see the fruit-bearing trees, flowers, birds, the scenic beauty of his hometown Calamba, the legendary Mount Makiling, and the distant Antipolo, with the shrine of the miraculous Lady of Peace and Good Voyage. At the age of 3, he began to join religious processions, novena in the church, and at the age of 5 he was able to read the Spanish Bible with the help of his mother. When Rizal was nearly 7 years old, June 6, 1868, his father took him for a pilgrimage to Antipolo in order to fulfill his mother's vows, which was made when Jose was born. Doña Teodora could not accompany them because he had given birth to Trinidad. It was the first trip of Rizal across Laguna de Bay and his pilgrimage to Antipolo. After praying at the shrine of the Virgen of Antipolo, they went to Manila to visit his sister Saturnina at the La Concordia College in Santa Ana. The Rizal children were bound together by ties of love and companionship. They were well bred, for their parents taught them to love and help one another. Of his sisters, Jose loved most the little Concha. He was a year older than Concha. He played with her, and from her he learned the sweetness of sisterly love. Unfortunately, Concha died of sickness in 1865 when she was only 3 years old. Jose, who was very fond of her, cried bitterly at losing her. When I was 4 years old, he said, I lost my little sister Concha, and then for the first time I shed tears caused by love and grief. The death of little Concha brought him his first sorrow. Of all the stories told by Doña Teodora to Jose, the story of the moth made the profoundest imprint on him, which he recalled after some years. My mother was teaching me how to read Spanish, the children's friends, El Amigo de los Niños. This was a rare book and old copy. This night, my mother became impatient with hearing me read so poorly. I did not understand Spanish, and so I could not read with expression. She took the book and read it to me, but I was watching the flame with some little moths circling around the flame. Soon, as my mother noticed that I was not interested, she stopped and said to me, I am going to read to you a very pretty story. I once opened my eyes on hearing the word story. She told me the story of the moth. Once upon a time, an old moth had warned her daughter against the flame, so beautiful, so inviting, yet fatal and deceitful, for it destroyed whoever came too close. She herself said she was once tempted by it. She had barely escaped with half-burnt wings. The frightened young moth promised to obey, but was soon asking herself, now why should my mother try to give me such a scare? Why should I close my eyes to such a pretty sight? These old people are such cowards. They think every fly is an elephant, any old dwarf a giant. What harm can it do to me, whatever she says, if I come near the flame as long as I'm careful? What I am a little silly? What a story I shall have for other girls if I, being very careful of course, take a closer look. No sooner said that done, and the silly little moth went fluttering around the flame. At first she only felt pleasant warmth. This encouraged her, and she flew closer and closer, until at last, dazzled by flame, fell and perished in it. As she put me to bed, my mother said, see to it that you do not behave like the young moth. Don't be disobedient, or you may get burned as it did. I do not know whether I answered or not. This story revealed to me the things until then unknown. Moths no longer were for me insignificant insects. Moths talked. They knew how to warn. They advised just like my mother. The light seemed to me more beautiful. It had grown more dazzling and more attractive. I knew why the moths circled the flame. The tragic fate of the young moth left a deep impact on Rizal's mind, and like that young moth, he was fated to die as a martyr for a noble ideal. Doña Teodora, Rizal's mother, was his first teacher. Barely 3 years old, Rizal learned the alphabet from his mother. He was taught how to read and write in Spanish. As he grew older, his parents employed private tutors to give him lessons at home. The first was Maestro Celestino and the second Maestro Lucas Padua. Later, an old man named Leon Monroy, a former classmate of Rizal's father, became the boy's tutor. This old teacher lived at the Rizal home and instructed Jose in Spanish and Latin. Unfortunately, he did not live long. He died 5 months later. After Monroy's death, the hero's parents decided to send their gifted son to a private school in Binyan. At about this time, two of his mother's cousins frequented Calamba. Uncle Manuel Alberto, seeing Rizal frail in body, concerned himself with the physical development of his young nephew and taught her latter love for the open air and developed in him a great admiration for the beauty of nature, while Uncle Gregorio, a scholar, instilled into the mind of the boy love for education. He advised Rizal, work hard and perform every task very carefully. Learn to be swift as well as thorough. Be independent in thinking and make visual pictures of everything. Literary work. Rizal possessed a God-given talent for literature. His mother, who was a lover of literature, noticed his poetic inclination, hence she encouraged him to write poetry. Since childhood, Rizal showed an unusual talent in art and literature. He scribbled verses on loose sheets of paper and on the textbooks of his sisters. His mother, who was a lover of literature, noticed his son's inclination and gift for writing poetry. At the age of 8, Rizal wrote his first poem in the native language entitled Sa Aking Mga Kabata, to My Fellow Children. This poem reveals Rizal's earliest nationalist sentiment in poetic verses. He proudly proclaimed that a people who truly love their native language will surely strive for liberty, like the bird which soars to freer space above, and that Tagalog is the equal of Latin, English, Spanish, and any other language. Father Leoncio Lopez, the old and learned parish priest of Calamba, fostered Rizal's love for scholarship and intellectual honesty. At an early age, Rizal was already exposed to the injustices and brutalities of Spanish authority in the Philippines, particularly the Guardia Civil, who were supposed to protect the people from harm. Rizal wondered why these abuses were happening, especially to the poor. Years later, he related, I spent many hours of my childhood down in the shore of the lake Laguna de Bay. I was dreaming of what might be over on the other side of the waves. Almost every day in our town, we saw the Guardia Civil lieutenant injuring some unarmed and inoffensive villagers. The villager's only fault was that while at a distance he had not taken off his hat and made his bow. The alcalde treated the poor villagers in the same way whenever he visited us. We saw no restraint put upon brutality. Acts of violence and other excess were committed daily. I asked myself if in the lands which lay across the lake, the people lived in this same way. I wondered if there they tortured any countryman with hard and cruel whips merely on suspicion, or ever yonder also in order to live in peace would one have to bribe tyrants. Rizal, young as he was, grieved deeply over the unhappy situations of his beloved fatherland. The Spanish misdeeds awakened in his boyish heart a great determination to fight tyranny. On the night Jose Rizal was born, other children were born in Calamba and hundreds of other children were also born all over the Philippines. But why is it that out of all these children, only one boy, Jose Rizal, rose to fame and greatness? In the lives of all men there are influences which cause some to be great and others not. In the case of Rizal, he had all the favorable influences few other children in his time enjoyed. These influences were the following: hereditary influence, environmental influence, and aid of divine providence. Hereditary influence. According to biological science, there are inherent qualities which a person inherits from his ancestors and parents. From his Malayan ancestors, Rizal evidently inherited his love for freedom, his innate desire to travel, and his indomitable courage. From his Chinese ancestors, he derived his serious nature, frugality, patience, and love for children. From his Spanish ancestors, he got his elegance of bearing, sensitivity to insult, and gallantry to ladies. From his father, he inherited a profound sense of self-respect, the love for work, and the habit of independent thinking. And from his mother, he inherited his religious nature, the spirit of self-sacrifice, and the passion for arts and literature. Environmental influence. According to psychologists, environment as well as heredity affects the nature of a person. Environmental influence includes places, associates, and events. The scenic beauties of Calamba and the beautiful garden of the Rizal family simulated the inborn artistic and literary talents of Jose Rizal. The religious atmosphere of his home fortified his religious nature. His brother Pasiano instilled in his mind the love for freedom and justice. From his sisters, he learned to be courteous and kind to women. The fairy tales told by his ayah during his early childhood awakened his interest in folklore and legends. His three uncles, brothers of his mother, exerted a good influence on him. Tio Jose Alberto, who had studied for 11 years in a British school in Calcutta, India, and had traveled in Europe, inspired him to develop his artistic ability. Tio Manuel, a husky and athletic man, encouraged him to develop his frail body by means of physical exercises, including horse riding, walking, and wrestling. And Tio Gregorio, a book lover, intensified his voracious reading of good books. Father Leoncio Lopez, the old and learned parish priest of Calamba, fostered Rizal's love for scholarship and intellectual honesty. The sorrow in his family, such as the death of Concha in 1865 and the imprisonment of his mother in 1871 to 1874, contributed to strengthen his character, enabling him to resist blows of adversity in latter years. The Spanish abuses and cruelties which he witnessed in his boyhood, such as the brutal acts of the lieutenant of the Guardia Civil and the alcalde, the unjust tortures inflicted on innocent Filipinos, and the execution of Fathers Gomez, Burgos, and Zamora in 1872, awakened his spirit of patriotism and inspired him to consecrate his life and talents to redeem his oppressed people. Aid of divine providence. Greater than heredity and environment in the fate of man is the aid of divine providence. A person may have everything in life, brains, wealth, and power, but without the aid of divine providence, he cannot attain greatness in the annals of the nation. Rizal was providentially destined to be the pride and glory of his nation. God had endowed him with the versatile gifts of genius, the vibrant spirit of nationalism, and the valiant heart to sacrifice for a noble cause. References: